The alien empire believed their queen was untouchable. She traveled with the most elite guards in the galaxy. Warriors bred for perfection. Soldiers who had never lost a battle. No assassin had ever come close. No rebellion had ever survived long enough to try. But on this day, the greatest threat to the alien queen would not come from enemies. It would come from her own guards. And the only person who would stand between her and death was a human engineer who wasn't even supposed to be there. A human in the wrong place. The royal ship Aurelia Prime floated through deep space like a glowing palace. It was not built for war. It was built to show power. Its halls were wide and beautiful. Its walls were covered with living crystal that changed colors depending on the queen's mood. But deep inside the ship, far away from the luxury and ceremony, a human engineer named Ethan Vale lay inside a narrow maintenance tunnel. He was holding a wrench. And he was talking to a machine like it had personally offended him. "Listen," Ethan said calmly. "You are a gravitic stabilizer. Your job is very simple. Do not explode." The machine answered by making a sound that resembled a box full of angry insects. Ethan sighed. "Fantastic." A floating drone beside him projected glowing warning symbols. System failure probability, 82%. "Yeah," Ethan muttered. "I figured." Ethan Vale was the only human technician working for the alien empire. Humans had joined the galactic community only 30 years earlier. Most alien species saw humans as strange. Too emotional. Too reckless. Too creative. But they also noticed something else. Humans could fix things that other species could not. Which was exactly why Ethan was currently upside down inside a machine that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated engineers. The sound that should not exist. Ethan tightened a bolt. The stabilizer hummed. For one beautiful second. Everything worked. Then the ship shook. Not gently. Not slightly. The entire vessel jerked sideways like something enormous had just slammed into it. Ethan's wrench floated out of his hand. "Oh," he said slowly. "That's not good." Red lights exploded across the corridor outside. Alarms screamed through the ship. The drone changed color from amber to bright red. "Alert. Hull breach detected." Ethan grabbed the side of the maintenance hatch. "Boarding attack," he whispered. The royal ship had not been attacked in over 200 years. Who would dare? Another impact slammed into the ship. The entire corridor twisted violently. Somewhere far away, metal screamed as part of the hull tore open. Ethan looked through the maintenance hatch. Outside, armored royal guards were running through the corridor. They were tall, elegant beings with silver armor and glowing energy blades. They were supposed to be unstoppable. But something was wrong. They looked confused. The Queen's chamber. At the center of the ship was the royal reception hall. The alien queen stood alone in the middle of the chamber. She was tall, graceful, calm. Her species looked almost human, except for the long silver ears that curved back behind her head like living sculptures. Her name was Queen Serelith, ruler of 12 star systems, commander of fleets that could destroy planets. Yet she stood without weapons. Because she had guards. 20 of them. They formed a perfect circle around her. Until the ship shook again. The chamber lights flickered. The guards raised their weapons. One of them shouted an order. But the doors sealed. Not as protection. As a malfunction. Another guard tried to override the system. Nothing happened. The security network was failing. And outside the chamber walls, something was cutting through the hull. A very unprofessional entrance. Back in the maintenance conduit, Ethan was trying to access the ship's control system. The console refused to cooperate. "Override security protocol," Ethan said. The machine responded politely. "Access denied." Ethan tapped the screen. "Harder." "Access granted," he suggested. The screen displayed a smiling icon, and redirected power to a decorative fountain somewhere on the ship. Ethan stared at it. "You know what?" he said slowly. "I deserve this." Then the floor collapsed. The maintenance panel broke open beneath him, and Ethan Vale dropped straight through the ceiling of the royal chamber. He hit the polished floor with a loud crash, slid across the room, and stopped directly in front of the alien queen. 20 guards turned their weapons toward him instantly. Ethan raised a hand. "Hi." Nobody spoke. The queen studied him quietly. Ethan slowly stood up and brushed dust off his jacket. "I realize," he said carefully, "this looks extremely unprofessional." Then the wall behind them exploded. The real attack. A circular hole burned through the chamber wall. Molten metal dripped from the edges. Through the smoke stepped soldiers in black exo-armor. Their weapons glowed with unstable energy. Pirates. Mercenaries. Professional killers. The guards reacted instantly. Energy blades ignited. But at that exact moment, the security system malfunctioned again. Ceiling turrets activated and began firing at everyone. Guards. Invaders. Anyone who moved. The perfect defense system had turned into chaos. Blasts of energy tore across the chamber. One guard was thrown across the floor. Another barely blocked a shot meant for the queen. The attackers advanced through the burning doorway. Ethan watched the situation unfold. Then he sighed. "Right," he said. "This is happening." The human decision. A phase bolt shot across the room, straight toward the queen. Her guards were busy fighting. No one saw it coming. Except Ethan. He didn't think. Humans rarely did in moments like this. He grabbed the nearest heavy object, a ceremonial metal platform, and shoved it sideways with all his strength. It scraped loudly across the floor. The energy blast struck it instead of the queen. The metal glowed red from the impact. Ethan crouched behind it awkwardly. "Well," he said breathlessly. "Good news." He looked up at the queen. "This thing is probably bulletproof." Queen Serelith stared at him. Not surprised. Not afraid. Just curious. Another blast struck the shield. Ethan flinched. "Okay," he added quickly. "Moderately bulletproof." The attackers were getting closer. The guards were scattered. The defense system was malfunctioning. The queen was exposed. And the only person standing between her and death was a human engineer holding a wrench. Ethan tightened his grip. "All right," he muttered. "New plan. Try not to die." And across the chamber, the enemy commander raised his weapon directly at the queen. The alien queen had faced assassins before. She had survived political conspiracies, civil wars, and even a coup attempt that lasted 3 months. But she had never seen something like this. Her own guards were scattered. The defense systems meant to protect her had become unpredictable. And standing between her and a squad of heavily armed attackers was a human engineer crouched behind a ceremonial platform. Ethan Vale peeked over the metal shield again. Another blast slammed into it. The platform vibrated violently. "Okay," Ethan muttered. "That definitely wasn't in the maintenance manual." Across the chamber, the black-armored attackers spread out with cold precision. Their movements were calm, controlled, and clearly practiced. These were not pirates. These were professionals. One of the invaders raised a weapon that hummed with dangerous power. "Target confirmed," the soldier said through a mechanical voice filter. "The queen is present." Queen Serelith did not move. She simply watched the human crouched in front of her. Most beings would have run. Most soldiers would have retreated. But Ethan Vale was not a soldier. And engineers had a very different way of solving problems. The human brain starts working. Ethan glanced around the room quickly. His eyes were not focused on the enemy. They were focused on the systems. Lights flickered along the ceiling. Security turrets fired wildly. The environmental control panels blinked with error messages. The entire ship was fighting itself. And Ethan realized something important. "This isn't random," he whispered. The queen tilted her head slightly. "What do you mean, human?" Ethan pointed toward the malfunctioning ceiling turret. "It's not broken," he said. It's confused. The Queen's long ears shifted slightly, a sign of interest among her species. Explain. Ethan gave a small smile. Someone hacked your ship. Another blast struck the metal shield beside him. Sparks sprayed across the floor. Ethan ducked again. Very rudely, I might add. Across the chamber, the invading soldiers continued advancing. They were closing the distance slowly, forcing the guards back. The alien warriors fought fiercely, but the chaotic defense system kept interrupting them. Friendly fire. Locked doors. Disabled weapons. Someone had sabotaged everything. And whoever planned this attack knew exactly how the ship worked. The hidden betrayal. One of the royal guards suddenly stepped backward. His armor flickered. His weapon lowered. Another guard shouted something in their language. But the guard who stepped back did not answer. Instead, he turned his weapon toward the Queen. Everything stopped. Even the attackers paused. Ethan blinked. Oh, he said slowly. Oh, that's extremely bad. The traitor guard fired. But Ethan reacted faster. He shoved the heavy shield sideways again. The energy blast slammed into it and exploded into sparks. Ethan grabbed the guard's dropped energy blade lying nearby. He had no idea how to use it. But it looked intimidating. All right. Ethan shouted. New rule. Nobody shoots the Queen. The traitor guard raised his weapon again. But before he could fire, one of the loyal alien guards tackled him violently. The two warriors crashed into a column, fighting with brutal precision. Queen Serelith watched the chaos with calm understanding. Now we know, she said quietly. This was never just an attack. Ethan nodded. Yeah, he replied. This was a coup. The engineer's crazy plan. Ethan quickly crawled toward a glowing panel on the wall. Energy blasts flew over his head. The attackers were getting closer. One of them aimed directly at Ethan. A royal guard blocked the shot with a shimmering energy shield. Human, the guard shouted. Stay behind cover. Ethan shook his head. Can't. He ripped open the control panel. Inside were glowing alien circuits. Complex. Beautiful. And currently being completely abused by the enemy hackers. Ethan cracked his knuckles. Okay, he whispered. Let's see how smart you really are. His fingers began flying across the interface. He didn't know the alien programming language perfectly, but he knew something else. Machines everywhere followed the same basic logic. Inputs, outputs, energy flow, and humans were very good at breaking systems that thought they were perfect. The attackers continued moving forward. One raised a weapon and fired directly at Ethan. But suddenly, the ceiling turrets turned and fired at the attackers instead. The soldiers jumped back in surprise. Ethan grinned. Hi, he said to the control panel. I'm the new system administrator. Chaos turns against the enemy. Across the chamber, the automated defenses suddenly changed behavior. Doors slammed shut behind the attackers. Security barriers rose from the floor. Energy grids flickered across the walls. The ship was still damaged, still unstable. But now the chaos had direction. And the direction was against the invaders. One attacker tried to escape through the breach. The door sealed before he could reach it. Another tried to shoot a turret. 3 more activated behind him. The attackers were now trapped in the same malfunctioning system they had created. Ethan leaned against the console, breathing hard. Okay, he said. That should slow them down. Queen Serelith studied him carefully. You just rewrote the command system of an Imperial flagship. Ethan shrugged. Temporary fix. The Queen looked at the battlefield. Her guards were regrouping. The attackers were struggling. But one soldier remained calm. The enemy commander stepped forward slowly. His armor was heavier than the others. His weapon larger. More powerful. He aimed it directly at the Queen again. Even the automated defenses hesitated. The weapon was generating an unstable energy field, something designed to destroy shields completely. Ethan's smile faded. "Oh," he whispered. "That's a problem." The commander fired. The human shield. The energy blast crossed the room in less than a second. There was no time. No strategy. No system hack. Just instinct. Ethan moved. He jumped directly in front of the Queen. The blast struck him. For a moment, the entire chamber filled with white light. The guards shouted. The Queen stepped forward. And when the light faded, Ethan was still standing. Barely. The energy had struck the shield generator attached to his tool belt. A small engineering device meant for dangerous repair work. It had absorbed most of the blast. Most. Ethan staggered but remained upright. He looked down at the smoking device. "Well," he said weakly, "that's definitely not covered by warranty." The enemy commander stared in disbelief. The alien guards looked shocked. Queen Serelith looked impressed. Because a human engineer had just done something no warrior expected. He had taken a weapon meant for a queen. And survived. Ethan lifted the glowing energy blade he had picked up earlier. His hands shook slightly. But his voice was steady. "All right," he said. "Who's next?" And across the chamber, the battle truly began. The enemy commander did not expect the human to still be standing. The weapon he had fired was designed to break military shields and vaporize armored soldiers. Yet somehow, the human engineer was still alive. Ethan Vale's knees trembled slightly as smoke curled from the small shield generator on his tool belt. The device sparked once, then died completely. Ethan stared at it. "Well," he sighed, "that's not good for the warranty." Across the chamber, the enemy commander slowly lowered his weapon. Even the attackers seemed confused. Humans were new to the galactic stage. Most alien civilizations still saw them as fragile creatures from a small blue planet. But the commander now looked at Ethan with something very different. Curiosity. Behind Ethan, Queen Serelith stepped forward. "You should move," she said calmly. "That weapon will fire again." Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. "Yeah," he replied. "I noticed." But he didn't move. Instead, he stared directly at the enemy commander. Because Ethan had finally realized something. This attack had been carefully planned. The sabotage. The hacked defense systems. The traitor guard. But whoever planned it made one very big mistake. They assumed everyone on the ship would follow the rules. Humans rarely did. The engineer's real weapon. Ethan slowly reached for the small tablet attached to his engineering belt. It was not a weapon. It was something far more dangerous. A diagnostic tool. Earlier, when Ethan hacked the ship systems, he had seen something unusual. The invaders were controlling parts of the ship remotely. They were feeding commands into the system. Which meant something very important. They were connected. And connections worked both ways. Ethan began typing quickly. The alien control interface struggled to understand his commands. Because Ethan was not using their elegant programming language. He was using something much simpler. Human logic. "All right," he whispered to the tablet. "Let's introduce you to human engineering." Across the chamber, the enemy commander raised his weapon again. But before he could fire, the lights went out. Every light in the chamber died at once. For a brief moment, the room was completely dark. Then emergency lights flickered on. But something had changed. The attacker's armor suddenly began flashing warning symbols. Their weapons powered down. One of the soldiers shouted in panic. What did he do? Ethan grinned. Just a small update. The human virus. The alien defense systems had been hacked earlier. But Ethan had just hacked the hackers. Using their own connection, he had uploaded a simple piece of human code. It was messy, inelegant, and incredibly effective. A feedback loop. Every command the attackers tried to send to the ship was now being mirrored back into their own armor systems. Their targeting software was confused. Their weapons were receiving false safety signals. Even their exosuits were struggling to understand their own sensors. To aliens who relied on perfect systems, the chaos was unbearable. The royal guards noticed immediately. One of them shouted, "Attack now!" The elite warriors surged forward. Energy blades flashed through the air. The attackers, suddenly unable to coordinate, were forced back. The battle turned in seconds. Queen Serelith watched the shift carefully. Then she looked at Ethan. "You created this." Ethan shrugged while still typing. "Humans call it a bug." The Queen studied him. "Your species weaponizes mistakes." Ethan smiled. "Constantly." The commander's last move. But the enemy commander did not panic. He simply removed his helmet. His face was not alien. It was one of the Queen's own species. Which meant something even worse. The rebellion had started inside the Empire. "You are clever, human," the commander said calmly. "But this ship will still fall." He pressed something on his armor. Deep inside the ship, a new alarm suddenly activated. Ethan's tablet flashed red. His smile vanished. "Oh no," he whispered. The commander had activated a core overload. The ship's main reactor was beginning to destabilize. Within minutes, the entire vessel would explode. The commander laughed quietly. "If the Queen dies with the ship," he said, "the Empire will collapse into chaos." The guards rushed toward him, but he stepped backward toward the open breach in the hull and jumped into space. His escape ship vanished into the darkness. Silence filled the chamber. Ethan stared at his tablet. The reactor countdown continued. 3 minutes until meltdown. The guards looked at the Queen. "What are your orders?" Queen Serelith looked at Ethan. "Can you stop it?" Ethan scratched his head. "Technically." The reactor alarm grew louder. "Maybe." The human solution. Ethan sprinted toward the wall console again. The reactor core was located deep inside the ship. There was no time to reach it physically. The entire system was overloaded. Any normal shutdown would fail. The Queen stepped beside him. "You require assistance." Ethan shook his head. "No." He took a deep breath. "Just stand back." His fingers began flying across the controls. Alien code scrolled rapidly across the screen. The guards watched in confusion. Ethan was not shutting down the reactor. He was doing something stranger. He was breaking it on purpose. He began redirecting power through dozens of secondary systems. Life support, gravity generators, navigation sensors, even the decorative fountain. Energy surged wildly through the ship. The reactor core screamed in protest. But the overload began slowing. The Queen watched the numbers change. "You are draining the reactor." Ethan nodded quickly. "Yep." The Queen blinked. "You are using the entire ship as a battery." Ethan grinned. "Exactly." The final alarm suddenly stopped. The reactor stabilized. The meltdown was over. The chamber fell silent. One of the alien guards looked at Ethan. That solution was completely irrational. Ethan leaned against the console, exhausted. "Thanks," he said. "We get that a lot." A new kind of ally. The royal guards slowly lowered their weapons. For the first time, they looked at the human with something close to respect. Queen Serelith stepped closer to Ethan. "You saved my life." Ethan shrugged. "You're welcome." The Queen studied him for a long moment. "Your species was underestimated." Ethan laughed. "Oh, absolutely." The Queen nodded slowly. "Perhaps it is time the Empire learned something from humanity." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Oh." The Queen's long silver ears tilted slightly. "Yes." She looked toward the stars outside the damaged hull. "Because today a human engineer protected a queen." She turned back to Ethan. "Tomorrow, humans may help protect the entire empire." Ethan looked around the ruined chamber. the scattered guards, the broken systems, the burning walls. Then he smiled. "Well," he said, "first we should probably fix the ship." And somewhere in deep space, the escaped commander watched the royal vessel survive. For the first time in his life, he realized something terrifying. Humanity had just entered the galaxy, and already, they were changing the rules of war.